I'm just going to indulge myself a little bit and say how exciting it is for me personally to have Frank Bidart back at Villanova. When I was a senior in college, I was lucky enough to take a poetry workshop with him when he came to Berkeley for a semester. I was a genetics and marine biology major. I had one class, one elective, my final semester in college, and I took his class, and it made me want to be a poet. Or he made me want to be a poet. And I could say it changed my life. And so it's really significant for me to have Bidart here again. He's continued to influence me as a poet and a teacher and as a critic. And it's just a real pleasure for him to be here for me. And I just wanted to say thank you publicly in front of all these people. So now that I've talked about myself, which I told my students not to do in their introductions, I'm going to turn things over to Alexis Nietzsche-Porik and Kathleen Simpson, the two students from the Literary Festival class, which runs in conjunction with this reading series. And if you are going to be here next year, think about taking the class. It's a great class. They're going to talk about Frank Bidart, not about themselves. So thank you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming out to this evening to Frank Bidart's reading, sponsored by the Literary Festival. To be honest, prior to this class, I've had little experience with reading and analyzing poetry. Before reading Bidart's Metaphysical Dog poems, I often associated works of poetry with classic features such as romantic language, rhyming, and the use of meter. However, upon reading Bidart's poetry, I was both intrigued and refreshed. His poems broke my preconceived notions based upon more traditional lyrical poetry and urged me to explore further what it means for something to be considered a poem. Bidart was born and raised in Bakersfield, California. He completed his undergraduate degree at the University of California at Riverside. He later attended Harvard University in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where he's continued to live, write, and teach. He was influenced by his professors and friends, Robert Lowell and Elizabeth Bishop, whom he met during his time at Harvard. Bidart's first two books, Golden State and The Book of the Body, both published in the 1970s, gained both attention and critical praise. However, with his publication of The Sacrifice in 1983 came a broader readership and his reputation as an uncompromisingly original poet. His other published works include In the Western Night, Desire, Music Like Dirt, Stardust, Watching the Spring Festival, and his most recent collection of poems, Metaphysical Dog. Additionally, Bidart co-edited Robert Lowell's collected poems with David Gawanter. Bidart's corpus of poetry explores themes such as philosophy, art, metaphysics, sexual desire in the body, and the human psyche. In his review of Bidart's most recent work, Metaphysical Dog, for the New York Times, Stephen Burt describes Bidart's use of extreme typography in his poetry as a way for Bidart to convey extreme states of mind which characterize many of these poems. He has employed this unusual formatting throughout his career in poems such as Writing Ellen West, Herbert White, and Elegy. This non-traditional element helps guide Bidart's audience in their reading of his poems and gives his poems a greater complexity and deeper meaning. I feel that Burt's final remarks in his review succinctly capture the essence of the poems contained in Metaphysical Dog. He states, Bidart writes through passion, but also through subtraction, leaving out all but the statements that seem essential to the soul, the desire, the wisdom, or the memory at hand. The results, however austere, can be revelations. His poems are doors best opened with cautious attention. Behind them you might even see yourself. Bidart's poetry forced me to confront not only the defining qualities of poetry, but also deeper philosophical questions about the relation of the mind and the body, the value of art, and the construct of institutionalized religion.
All right, again, thank you for coming. So before I say anything, I want to congratulate Frank Bidart once again on his latest book of poems, which recently won the National Book Critics Circle Award. He has won several awards in the past, among others, the Ballingen Prize in American Poetry, the Rebecca Bobbitt Prize from the Library of Congress. When we found out his latest collection won the National Book Critics Circle Award, we were all very excited. It totally makes up for all the snow days and having to reschedule. So now we get to celebrate with you. I want to point out that, like Kathleen, most of my literary experience has taken the form of fiction writing and analysis. So for that reason, reading Metaphysical Dog was not always an easy task for me. This collection felt like a huge metaphysical wrestling match against formidable opponents, coming to terms with identity, understanding the shortcomings of romantic love and religion, but underneath it all, the unquenchable desire to grasp that absolute. Needless to say, I felt I was out of my league. I was mesmerized by poems I barely comprehended and realized that this was entirely the effective use of voice, a powerful, vibrant element of Frank Bidart's poetry. Oftentimes, this element alone led me through the complexity of the ideas with which Bidart struggles with in Metaphysical Dog. Perhaps a classical structure, as Kathleen said, would have made reading this poetry more comfortable, but the discomfort I felt by not only the concepts, but the way that the words were placed on the page, it opened my eyes to a new way to understanding poetry's art. In an interview with Mark Halliday, Bidart commented that, and these are his words, "It's how the words exist in space that allows them, on the page, their eloquence. Crucial to getting a character to speak in a poem is hearing in your head, as you write, the way the character talks." He adds a dimension of space to his poetry that gives the words that voice, that life, which allows for the concepts to flow more readily from paper to reader. The experience of Bidart's poetry was not by any means easy, and yet I am so glad I encountered it. With that, I'd like to give us the I'd like to give it up to Frank Bidart. Give him a warm up.
Thank you both very much. And Lisa. Of course, I remember Lisa so vividly, writing very fierce poems. And it's wonderful how her life has blossomed and work. Well, thank you so much, truly. I didn't used to have to wear my glasses when I read. Now I do. I'm going to begin with a poem that is about a movie, Pandora and the Flying Dutchman. It's not a very good movie, but one doesn't choose always the works of art that haunt one's imagination or one gets caught by. In any case, here it is. Am I loud enough? Okay. Title is He is Ava Gardner. He's Ava Gardner at the height of her beauty in Pandora and the Flying Dutchman. I had allowed him to become for me necessity. I was not ever for him necessity. An adornment, yes, a grace note, not necessity. Everyone, the men at least, are crazy about Pandora. She's smart, self-deprecating, funny. She who has seen seemingly everything about love and says she has no idea what love is. Who knows the world finds her beautiful, so that she must test every man and slightly disgusted find him wanting. Clearly she is not in this crowd of men eager to please her, to flatter and bring her drinks, found someone who is for her necessity. Watching Pandora and the Flying Dutchman, you feel sympathy for the beautiful who cannot find anyone who is for them necessity. He's Ava Gardner at the height of her beauty. Fucked up. You knew you'd never fall for someone not fucked up. You watch her test each suitor. She sings about love to an old friend, drunk, a poet. He asks her to marry him. After she again refuses, you see him slip something into his drink. Then dies, poisoned. She says he has tried that too many times. Now she feels nothing. Promising nothing, she asks the famous race car driver, who also wants to marry her, to shove the car he has worked on for months over the cliff into the sea. He does. In the first flush of pleasure, she agrees to marry him. The next day, he has the car's carcass, pouring water, dragged up from the sea. You are the learned, amused professor, surrounded by his collections, who carefully pieces together fragments of Greek pots. You know it is foolish to become another suitor, hors de combat. Soon, you are the only one she trusts. You become at moments her confessor. Then she meets the Dutchman. He offers little, asks nothing. When she withdraws her attention, he isn't spooked. Because when she meets him, he is painting the portrait of someone who has her face. With petulance, she scrapes off the face. He charmingly makes her head a blank ovoid and says, that's better. She thinks that she is the knife that cutting him will heal him. You know, she is right. You have discovered he is the fabled Dutchman, who for centuries has sailed the world's seas unable to die though he wants to die. You know what it is to want to die. His reasons are a little contrived, a mechanism of the plot, reasons that Pandora at the end discovers. He murdered centuries earlier, through jealousy and paranoia, his wife. Now, unless he can find a woman willing to die out of love for him, sail out with him and drown, he cannot ever find rest. This logic makes sense to her. She who does not believe in love will perform an act proving its existence. She wants, of course, to throw her life away. The Dutchman will always arrive because that's what she wants. Those of us who look on, who want the proximate and partial to continue, loathe the hunger for the absolute. All your life you have watched as two creatures think they have found in each other necessity. Watched as the shell then closes for a time around them. You envy them as you gather with the rest of the village, staring out to sea. When she swims out to his boat to give herself, both succeed at last in drowning. Couples stay together when each of the two remains a necessity for the other, which you cannot know until they cease to be. Tautology that is the sum of what you know. He is a master. He's lived by becoming the master of the alchemy that makes, as you stare into some one person's eyes, makes you adore him. Eyes that say that despite the enormous landscapes that divide you, you are brothers. He too is trapped in all that divides soul from soul. Then suddenly, he's fluttering his finger ends between yours. He rises from the table, explains he had no sleep last night, and leaves. You couldn't worm your way into becoming for him necessity. When did he grow bored with seduction and confessors and find the Dutchman? For months there has been nothing but silence. when you sent him a pot only you could have with care pieced together from the catastrophe of history. More silence. The enterprise is abandoned. Something there is in me that makes me think I need this thing. It gives this thing the illusion of necessity. As enthralled to flesh as I, he could not see beneath this old face I now wear, this ruinous, ugly body, that I am the Dutchman. But nobody knows when living where necessity lies. Maybe later, if history is lucky, the urn will not refuse to be pieced together. This is neither good nor bad. It is what is. Name the bed. Half light, just after dawn. As you turn back at the doorway, you to whom the ordinary sensuous world seldom speaks, expected to see in the thrown-off rumpled bedclothes nothing. Scream stretched across it. Someone wanted more from that bed than was found there. Name the bed that's not true of. Bed where your twin died. Eraser bed. This is called Writing Ellen West. Writing Ellen West was exorcism. Exorcism of that thing within Frank that wanted, after his mother's death, to die. Inside him was that thing that he must expel from him to live. He read The Case of Ellen West as a senior in college and immediately wanted to write a poem about it, but couldn't, so he stored it, as he has stored so much that awaits existence. Unlike Ellen, he was never anorexic, but like Ellen, he was obsessed with eating and the arbitrariness of gender and having to have a body. Ellen lived out the war between the mind and the body, lived out in her body each stage of the war, its journey and progress, in which compromise, reconciliation is attempted, then rejected, then mourned, till she reaches at last, in an ecstasy costing not less than everything, death. He was grateful he was not impelled to live out the war in his body, hiding in compromise, well wadded with art he adored, and with stupidity and distraction. The particularity inherent in almost all narrative, though contingent and exhausting, tells the story of the encounter with particularity that flesh, as flesh, must make. Ellen West was written in the year after his mother's death. By the time she died, he had so thoroughly betrayed the ground of intimacy on which his life was founded, he had no right to live. No use for him to tell himself that he shouldn't feel this, because he felt this. He didn't think this, but he thought this. After she died, his body wanted to die, but his brain, his cunning, didn't. He likes narratives with plots that feel as if no one willed them. His mother in her last year revealed that she wanted him to move back to Bakersfield and teach at Bakersfield College and live down the block. He thought his mother, without knowing that this is what she wanted him to die. All he had told her in words, and more than words for years, was that her possessiveness and terror at his independence were wrong, wrong, wrong. He was the only person she wanted to be with. But he refused to live down the block. And then she died. It must be lifted from the mind, must be lifted and placed elsewhere, must not remain in the mind alone. Out of the thousand myriad voices, thousand myriad stories in each human head, when his mother died, there was Ellen West. This is the body that you could draw out of you to expel from you the desire to die. Give it a voice. Give each scene of her life a particularity and necessity that in Binswanger's recital are absent. Enter her skin, so that you can then make her other and expel her. Survive her. Animal mind, eating the ground of Western thought, the mind-body problem. She who in the last months of her life abandoned writing poems in disgust at the failure of her poems is a poem. She in death is incarnated on a journey whose voice is the voice of her journey. Arrogance of Plutarch, of Shakespeare and Berlioz, who thought they made what Cleopatra herself could not make. Arrogance of the maker. Werther killed himself, and then young men all over Europe imitated him and killed themselves. But his author, Goethe, cunning master of praxis, lived. Frank thought when anything is made, it is made not by its likeness, not by its twin or mirror, but its opposite. Ellen, in his poem, asks, without a body, who can know himself at all? In your pajamas, you moved down the stairs just to the point where the adults couldn't yet see you. To hear more clearly the din, the sweet cacophony of adults partying. Phonograph voices among them, phonograph voices, their magpie beauty. Sweet, din, magpie beauty. One more poem, one more book in which you figure out how to make something out of not knowing enough. Four more poems. Mouth. It was as if starving, his stomach rebelled at food. As quickly as he ate, it passed right through him. His body refused what his body needed. Recipe for death. But he said, what others think is food isn't food. It passed right through him. He shoved meat into his mouth, but still his body retained nothing. Absorbed nothing. He grows thinner. He thinks he cannot live on nothing. He has the persistent sense that whatever object he seeks is not what he seeks. Now he repeats the litany of his choices. Love, which always to his surprise exhilarated, even as it tormented and absorbed him. Unendingly under everything, art. Trying to make a work of art he can continue to inhabit. The choices he made, he said he made almost without choosing. The best times, I must confess, are when one cannot help oneself. Has his pride at his intricate inventions come to nothing? Nothing he could now name or touch is food. Sex was the bed where you learn to be naked and not naked at the same time. Bed where you learn to move the unsustainable weight inside, and too often lost the key to it. Faces too close that despite themselves promise, then out of panic, disappoint. Not just out of panic, only in his mind is he freely both here and not here. The imperious or imagined needs of those you love or think you love demand you forget that when you smell your flesh, you smell unfulfillment. We're creatures, he thinks, caught in an obscure, ruthless economy. His hunger grows as whatever his mouth fastens upon fails to feed him. Recipe for death. But he's sure he'll learn something once he sees La Notte again. He's placed Duino elegies next to his bed. He craves the cold catechism Joyce mastered, writing Ithaca. Now he twists within the box. He cannot exit or rise above. He thinks he must die, when what will not allow him to retain food makes him see his body has disappeared. Elegy for Earth. Elegy for Earth. Because Earth's inmates travel in flesh and hide from flesh and adore flesh, you hunger for flesh that does not die. But hunger for the absolute breeds hatred of the absolute. Those who are the vessels of revelation, or who think that they are, ravage us with the promise of rescue. My mother outside in the air, waving, shriveled, as if she knew this is the last time. Watching as I climbed the stairs and the plane swallowed me. She and I could no more change what we hurtled toward than we could change the weather. Finding my seat, unseen, I stared back as she receded. They drop into holes in the earth. Everything you loved and hated, as you will drop. And the moment when all was possible, gone. You are still above earth. The moment when all and nothing is possible, long gone. Terrified of the sea, we cling to the hull. In adolescence, you thought your work, ancient work, to decipher at last human beings' relation to God. Decipher love. To make what was once whole, whole again. Or to see why it never should have been thought whole. Earth was a tiny labyrinthine ball orbiting another bigger ball. So bright, you can go blind staring at it. when the source of warmth and light withdraws, then terrible winter. When burning and relentless, it draws too close. Their narcotically gorgeous, fecund earth withers as if the sun taught us what we will ever know of the source. Now, too far, then too close. Blood Island, where you for a time lived. And the last poem I'll read now, unless someone asks me to read something else. For an unwritten opera. For an unwritten opera. Once you had a secret love, seeing even his photo, a windows flung open high in the airless edifice that is you. Though everything looks as if it is continuing just as before, it is not. It is continuing in a new way. Sweet lingo, O'Hara and Ashbury teach. That's not how you naturally speak. You tell yourself first that he is not the air you need. Second, that you loathe air. As a boy, you despised the world for replacing God with another addiction, love. Despised yourself. Was there no third thing? But every blue moon, the skeptical, the adamantly disabused, find themselves, like you, returned to life by a secret, like him in you. Now you understand Janacek at 70, in love with a much younger married woman, chastely writing her. As in Mozart, song remains, no matter how ordinary, how flawed the personae. For us poor mortals, private accommodations, magpie beauty. Thanks.